Hey everybody, this is Basil. The Basil, the one you're expecting. But I'm giving you a little disclaimer here at the top, which you should be used to by now. We do a lot of disclaimers. For some reason, we have to do that now. But I'm just letting you know, I was on location somewhere else when we recorded this, and I didn't have my big, fancy, diamond-studded NASA headset when we recorded, so I'm on kind of a piece of junk headset. So there might be a couple times where I sound a little fuzzy or sound a little muffled. It's not my fault. It's technology. All right? Okay, so here we go.
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio.
Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in.
Those who maintain that the Earth is a globe that spins suggest that people standing at the equator are being whirled around at approximately 1,000 miles an hour. They further maintain that the Earth is spinning around the Sun at a speed of 67,000 miles per hour, and that our Sun is supposedly racing around the center of our galaxy at some 600,000 miles per hour. And yet, you and I both know that on many days it's possible to stand outside without a single hair being messed up by the breeze.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
We used to call the word world, not globe. I saw that like in the past 30 years how we went slowly. Maybe you're too young, but let me tell you. I saw them slowly go from people all over the world. Many world leaders from all over the world got together. This is a worldly phenomenon. This is the world. I saw them go from the word world slowly, inch by inch, just inserting it every once in a while. So now it's just always the word globe. Notice that? It's not worldwide distribution, it's global distribution. It's global leaders. People all over the world, across the world, to people around the globe.
We're now showing you a view of the Earth through the telephoto lens. Okay, we're not receiving a picture right now. How about now? Okay, we don't have a picture yet. You seen anything at all yet? Okay, Paul, wait, we don't have a picture yet. Alright, we'll put the other lens back on and we'll show you. Oh, wait, we have a picture now. Okay, it's coming in as a real bright blob on the screen. It's hard to tell what we're looking at. Oh, you're looking through some haze on the window, too, unfortunately. Yeah, the Earth is very bright beside.
Here's Basil and Boss.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Canary Cry Radio. My name is Basil.
And this is Gons. Welcome to episode number 089.
89.
And our motto here has always been to think outside the cage, and that might be literal with this episode. There's an old Incubus song called Wish You Were Here, and the lyrics go something like this. The sky resembles a backlit canopy with holes punched in it. Well, that might not be too far from the truth, according to our guest today. The first thing we're taught in school is that 1 + 1 = 2 and that the Earth is a globe. But what if this entire enterprise was a sham, the biggest conspiracy to ever behold humanity? In this episode, we will explore the impossible, the unfathomable, the ridiculous notion that the Earth is actually flat. Our guest is Mark Sargent. He's the champion of the first pinball world tournament in 1994 and has worked in the technology sector ever since. He also happens to be a newly convert to the flat Earth or enclosed world theory. His YouTube channel, Mark K. Sargent, has published a series of videos called Flat Earth Clues, which he describes as videos designed to get both our heads around the design of the flat Earth system that we live in and who has been involved in the deception to hide it from you. So we'd like to welcome Mark Sargent. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Gons, I just got to make a comment. Those intros are just getting longer and longer and longer as we go.
Eventually, it's just going to be me doing an intro. That's going to be the whole show.
No, that's nothing. I've had on some shows, I've had literally a 20-minute intro where they're actually doing more of my material than I am. And then finally I get in. It's okay, what do you want me to say?
You really got to get into the deep stuff. But by the way, the term flat Earth theory and the other term enclosed world.
Yeah.
You know, let's just go with enclosed world.
Yeah, you know,
it sounds a lot more legit.
Well, yeah. I mean, flat Earth. Everybody knows. Everybody's conditioned that the term flat Earth, you know, is synonymous with crazy, with
scientific
insane.
backwardness.
Yeah, absolutely. With archaic religious belief, and I disagree wholeheartedly. But I understand the visceral response that some people have toward it. So I have been pushing enclosed world, and actually, quite a few of the flat earthers have been saying, you know, you should go with. Yeah, you should go with enclosed world because you're not a true flat earther. And I was like, all right, fine.
Well, you are getting criticism from true flat earthers.
That is, I know.
They don't even want you on their team.
It's I know you would think that because I don't follow what in the purest term is of what a flat earth is. You know, like flat as a coin. Which I disagree somewhat with, and you know, a few things about the moon and gravity, and they said, well, you're not a true flat earther, and it's like, fine. Either way, it's not a globe, so why are we arguing?
Yeah,
but they keep going. So yeah, in fact, I'm going to be making an anti-shill interview video here real soon.
That'll probably be to your benefit.
Yeah.
Before we really get started and get into some of the crazy stuff, can we just address that you sound like you're 20? How old are you?
I am 46. In fact, soon to be 47. And thank you for saying that I sound young. But
you have like the most beautiful, like young voice that we've ever had on the show. And maybe it's just because we spend most of our time talking to like seasoned gentlemen.
There you go.
But you're definitely one of the youngest voices, so that'll be fun. That'll be fun, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's just start. I have this question here that I have been actually working on for a few days. Let me just pull it up here.
You've been working on a question for a few days?
Yeah, hold on. Here we go.
All right. I like that you're pulling stuff out of the blue.
Yeah, here we go. Are you ready?
Okay.
What?
Is this a game show?
That's it. Just what the heck are you talking about? So we have an enclosed Earth. Give everybody an intro here.
This
has been kind of at least for me, it's been a recent phenomenon. Like that's come up like kind of I don't know.
2015. Yeah. Oh yeah. We wouldn't be talking about this last year. Not at all. Okay. In fact, everybody that's interviewed me has said the same thing. If you would have
a lot of buzz now.
2015, for whatever reason, there's this topic is getting a lot of traction, and everybody said the same thing. It's like, you know, I can't believe we're actually talking about this, and I'm the same way. 9 months ago is when I really started digging into this.
Yeah,
going through videos mostly, and then literally, I'm not kidding you, 8 weeks ago, I went all in and decided to make some videos. You know, I woke up in the middle of the night with this clarity, you know, that Jerry Maguire moment, and said, you know, there's something to this. There's really something to this, to the point where, you know, the people that had stuff out there. I mean, it was okay stuff, but I felt it was a little staticky. Right. And really, all I did was turn the dial on the radio, and you know, everybody started losing their mind. It's like, what is this music? So, but the short version, for those of you who haven't bothered to go to YouTube by now and click on Flat Earth Clubs, or at this point just Google Flat Earth Clubs and the whole thing explodes. It goes under the assumption that the model that was introduced to us as the globe 500 years ago, you know, roughly, you know, depending on when you want to, you know, take that in, was artificially put in there. You know, the first 4,500 years of our history, in every religion, every culture, every tribe, everything, everyone believed that the world was a flattish surface that was enclosed by this giant canopy, and where you saw the stars and the planets, which were really just a very, very well rendered art image, and that the sun and the moon were much smaller and hovering above our Earth. It was a giant Truman Show simulation.
Yeah.
And then 500 years ago, that changed. The scientific community and whether or not it was, artificially put in by a higher power or, the creator, the builders, whoever, both science and religion latched on to this and they kept it going. The globe model was introduced and for 20 generations, that's what we taught people. But there was a problem there. And the problem was there was literally no technology to prove it.
Yeah.
Hot air balloons to carry people didn't come along till 1760. Planes didn't come along till 1900. That's 400 years after, the globe model was introduced. And planes still couldn't fly, into high enough atmospheres. I mean, we're still advancing plane technology, but the rocket program didn't come along until 1957. And then after that, the question is, okay, let's say you go up there. NASA was formed in 1958. Let's say you go up there and the Earth isn't exactly what you think it looks like, what you've been putting in classrooms, for generation after generation. Would you tell people? And so that's when I really started digging into it. And some of the first things, I looked at the timeline going from, Copernicus all the way forward. I looked at government activities, but what I really started looking at was, excuse me, how the world really changed starting from like 1956 to the present, where everybody in all world governments started acting really, really strange after 1956. And by the time I was done, the globe model for me was, it was obvious for me, it was absolutely not a globe. Now, how flat it was and exactly what shape it was, because, even Neil deGrasse Tyson comes out and says, oh, it's an oblate spheroid or it's pear-shaped or whatever. I'll even take it, and the one, some people say, well, it's kind of like a wadded up piece of chewing gum. But for me, it's somewhat where in between. But it begs the question, why is every image that we see of the Earth, whether a composite or a NASA image, and there's so very few, why are they always perfect spheres if they're not? And again, once I kept digging into it deeper and deeper, it just got to the point where it's like, yeah, it feels way more, everything pointed more towards a giant under the dome Truman Show enclosed world than it did a globe model.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I'm sure a lot of evidence or clues, I guess, as they keep being called. But can we just take this slow?
Sure.
Because
I know I just gave you like a big overview, but
yeah,
you want to dig into this if you want to drill down.
So, I just want to know, let's start with the very basic clue or the basic piece of evidence. Gons, are you okay with that? I know you're a little bit more studied up, but for me and the rest of the people on the planet, we need to start from the beginning.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just interject and say that, before we get into all of it, that I spent, an afternoon watching the Flat Earth Clues videos. And, I can't say that I'm like totally convinced, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit that it put a rock in my shoe. I walked outside right afterwards to walk my dogs, and I kind of looked around like, how do we really know, what we're told? So that's kind of the goal, I think, with this episode for our listeners. So, but go ahead, Basil, go ahead and take it to where you want to. I had planned to go through each of the clues, but
we can do that because the going through in order would actually probably help.
Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and let Basil jump in, and then we can go there. I have it all outlined. So
yeah, because I am the clueless one here. So let's start from the very beginning.
Okay,
and let's convince me.
Okay, from the very beginning, one of the first things I looked at was, and I hate to point the fingers too much at NASA here because, NASA. In fact, they came on the radio on one of my interviews previously.
I heard that. I did hear that.
It's like, wow, that was spooky, and I was sad. I had just been off air, and they were continuing on anyway, but. What the first clue that I dealt with was really, other than the introduction, I asked some very, very basic questions. And one of the first questions I had was, why are there no pictures of the Earth from space? I was trying to basically create the doubt of what you see is not really what you see, because everybody, when I ask them, I say, okay, how do you know the Earth is round? And everybody comes up with that knee-jerk response, which is, well, we know, duh, you're an idiot. Why would you ever think it's not round? I go, okay, other than fire burns and there's gravity, how do you know that the Earth is a sphere? And I go, and then they say, well, we've got the picture. And, NASA took the picture. I go, okay, can you tell me how the Earth is a sphere without using the word NASA? Because if you Google, the Earth from space, and you can do this right now, you will find just rows and rows and rows of composite images. And if you go back not very far at all, 10 years, maybe 12 years, those composite images weren't even there. The only thing you saw...
Why don't you explain what a composite image is?
Got it. A composite image would be like, for example, if Google Maps, if you use like Google Street View, you have those cars that drive around neighborhoods and they take pictures of every street and then they layer them together in a composite so that when you pull out, you'll see the street. And if you pull out farther, well, they have planes that also fly over neighborhoods and they take pictures of areas in strips. And, the same thing, you could use commercial airliners, spy planes, but a composite image is literally just pieces of a jigsaw puzzle put together to make it look like a whole. So the Earth, when you go into Google Earth, you're not actually looking at a picture of the Earth. You are looking at a series of composite images. It is not literally a picture of the Earth, which was really one of the big selling points when I started this thing was there's no actual pictures of the Earth. The only picture of the Earth on the internet, the one that NASA put their stamp on and said, this is a picture of the Earth, there was only one that was out there that they took in supposedly either 1969 or 1972, depending on when you think that thing was stamped. And literally, that was the only image of the Earth from space. And you'll know which one I'm talking about because it's a real cloudy Earth. It shows the bottom part of Africa and a big crescent cloud system below Africa and then all of Antarctica. Literally, that was the only image of the Earth on the internet all the way through, I believe, like 2004, maybe 2003. I'm still trying to, look at the archives. But when I was looking back in 2000, when I was trying to use it as a desktop, that was the only image I could find. In fact, the first iPhone, that globe image, that default globe image on the iPhone, that is a composite image. That is not an actual picture of the Earth, and everybody admits that. So the question then became, all right, if that's the case, then why aren't there hundreds, if not thousands of pictures on Google? Why can't you just go into a NASA section? And not only NASA, let's talk about all the supposed satellites that are out there. If there's tens of thousands of satellites, there's got to be a whole bunch with HD cameras. GoPros aren't that expensive. There should be a whole bunch of pictures out there. To that point, one of the first clue that I did, called The Empty Theater, was something, it was something in the back of my head that was really kind of itching, and which was not only did it seem that there were no, in the real world, that there were no pictures of the Earth from space, but there had never been a Hollywood movie, and to this day, that has never been done that has actually covered a real world type, a documentary type style, or even based on a true story style of of the space program landing on the moon. And that was unbelievable to me, because from a Hollywood standpoint, as we all know, Hollywood makes a lot of crap. And they make remakes of everything. There's movies that are made by Invasion of the Body Snatchers, been remade four times. And there's never been a movie of the moon. And so for me, was really casting doubt and the influence of NASA. Whereas, they won't even let the fictional world talk about the moon missions, try to portray it, because it hits too close to home. So that was the initial clue that I did. And I know not a lot of people talk about it, but for me, it was like putting that out there. It was like, things that make you go, that's what I put that out there.
That's really interesting, because a couple of things that you pointed out. Yeah. First off, you have this guy that's out there, Matthew Boylan, who was, he's a realist painter. He was supposedly hired by NASA to do some, image work. And he has this lecture out there that you can find on YouTube and stuff. And, he shows, he puts up two pictures and he asks the audience, is this a painting or a picture? Yeah. And, the audience can't tell. And it's one of those things where it makes you just question, like, okay, even the pictures that are supposedly real, how do we really know? We just have to trust that it's real, you know? So
exactly. Yeah. There's no, the space program, the space world is really militarized. Yeah. There are two companies out there, SpaceX and Virgin Airlines. They're trying to do their own private space programs, but they're running into huge hurdles and delays and problems. And, that's no accident, in my opinion. It's, because you wouldn't want to let these guys go too far.
Right.
But we can get into that later.
Right. The Hollywood thing too is also interesting because, obviously you pointed out a bunch of stuff, and you said, I think in the clues you mentioned that there was one film that sort of, it was like it was a movie that was 3 hours long that didn't really answer any questions.
Yeah. There's only been two. In fact, in Hollywood, remember, this is supposedly the biggest achievement in mankind. And there's only been two movies that even have scratched the surface. The first was The Right Stuff in 1983, which was 11 years after the end of the Apollo missions. It was 3 hours and 12 minutes long. And it barely even got to the Earth orbit missions. And you're thinking, oh, okay, well, there'll be a sequel. Sequel never happened. And then there was a big gap from 1983 till 1995 when Apollo 13 came out. And Apollo 13, the entire movie was set inside a capsule that never set down on the moon.
Right.
And then after 1995, nothing in Hollywood ever touched it, with the exception of the Tom Hanks From the Earth to the Moon. I think it was Showtime or HBO. And forgive me because I didn't remember that one. But it was, that kind of touched on it a little bit, but there's been no Hollywood movie made ever. And I cannot believe I'm the only one on YouTube, because the internet hive mind misses nothing and nobody else has talked about this. It's just, but that's because we've got so many other movies in the fictional world, like Red Planet, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like Solaris and all the others that reinforce the globe and the space program through association.
Right.
So nobody thinks about it. So when you ask people, say, hey, remember that movie about the moon? They'll say, yeah. I go, really? Which was it? They go, they don't know.
Right.
They have no idea. So,
and that's weird too, because just recently the movie Interstellar,
yes,
there's a premise there that the world is under the it's a near future, and the world is under the impression that we never went to the moon, and we actually just had an episode on that topic. But I find it interesting too. Just to throw this in there, there's a Red Hot Chili Peppers song with the lyrics. I think it was off the album Californication. There's a line: "Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement." And that could be true.
Somebody sent that to me. Yeah, that's
really on top of the song lyrics today, guys.
Hey, these musicians, they know the truth apparently.
Yeah,
and they put it in the music.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, but we got a bunch of clues to cover. So I'll just jump forward ahead. So the bird wall was the big one, though. By number 2, that was my point of no return. And the bird wall covered an American explorer. His name was Admiral Richard Byrd. He was the youngest admiral in the United States Navy, American hero and a big time explorer. He did the North Pole in 1926 by plane, and then for whatever reason they sent him down to the South Pole. And from 1928 till 1957, when he died, he all his missions were in the South Pole, and he did big missions. And he had done a whole bunch of missions, big operations before 1950, and then it was almost like he was looking for something. And for me, and I really didn't say this in the clues, but I felt he was more of a point man that, call who do you want, government, secret society. They knew what he was looking for, but he didn't seem to find it. So he goes back to the States in 1954 and does this interview. And we were so lucky to get this, and it's on YouTube. You can look it up, Richard Byrd television interview, CBS, somebody on CBS released it.
Yeah.
And he comes on and he starts talking about Antarctica, and how wonderful it is, and it's going to be, this next great resource, and how important, and from a money standpoint, you could see he was hyping up all the companies. He said, there's a mountain range made out of coal that could fuel the entire world. There's oil, there's minerals, there's uranium. All these countries are down there. Everything's great. They're getting ready for their next mission, which occurred literally less than a year after that interview in 1955, called Operation Deep Freeze. He goes down there in 1955, Operation Deep Freeze, runs from 55 to 56, and whatever they didn't think they found, before that point, that's when everything changed in 1956, because the world, and it's completely hidden, the levels that things change from a government standpoint. So everybody left the ice almost immediately. That was, that's a big indicator. Russia, England, Australia, New Zealand, everybody left it. Everyone who was going to make money left the ice at the same time. Russia and America starts up their rocket program, like their lives depended on it in 1957. And then by 1958, they start firing nukes straight up, both Russia and the United States. Now, but 1958, NASA is formed immediately. They keep firing nukes. 1959, they simultaneously discover. So here's what 1959 is a great year, because not only do they NASA announces, because Van Allen works for NASA, announces the Van Allen radiation belt, supposedly this super dangerous lethal band of radiation in sort of like a dome structure above the Earth. And at the same time, they close off Antarctica permanently. They form the Antarctic Treaty in 1959, and they seal off millions and millions of square miles, depending on how big you think it is, from everybody, all countries. So 10 nations signed it in 1959, and every nation that became economically viable after that also had to sign it. So if you own a country and you become a tradable partner in the world, they throw this piece of paper in front of you. By the way, you can't go down to Antarctica. And you say, well, how long? You say, ever. You never get to go down. And for me, that goes against especially in America, that's
really bizarre.
Yeah. From a capitalist point of view, oil companies have the power, the backstage pass to everything. And you're telling me they can't even petition to go down there? Come on. It didn't make sense. Not only that, but Russia and the United States Russia and England were still rebuilding from World War II. They could have used the resources. Nobody gets to go down there. So you see, so at the same time, again, you create, and I thought it was a bad move on their part. I do not believe the Van Allen radiation belts are real by any standpoint, but they announced it in 1959. And then they seal off Antarctica in 1959. And everybody says now, because there's another treaty on top of that, it's an environmental treaty. And people go, oh, well, it's because of the penguins, you can't go down there because of that. And it's like, really? Because 1959 environmentalism wasn't even a word. It wasn't even in our vocabulary. Heck, Greenpeace wasn't even founded until 1971. And that was, a couple guys in a tie-dye shirt and a boat. No, they had no power in 1971. And so when those two things were sealed off, all of a sudden you had your X and your Y axis. I'm sorry, your X and your Y axis. And I thought, all right, it's starting to smell like structure. And that's where...
What do you mean by that?
Well... For me, it came down to a couple things. First off, it was like, okay, I was designing in my head, because I came from a game development background. I was like, okay, how would I build a flat model? But somewhere during that, I had to say, okay, how would I hide a flat model? And one of the first things you do is you'd hide the outer edge. If it was a circular outer edge or whatever shape you want, you'd have to seal that off to where people didn't get to go there, which they did in 1959. And you'd also have to seal off the upper edge. But since you can't do that physically with a military force, well, I mean, you can, and we'll get to that in a second. One of the first things you're going to do is scare people. And that is, okay, well, there's a radiation layer there that's so lethal that no one should ever think about going up there, which discourages private companies. Not only that, but in 1958, you create NASA, which is basically the militarization of space. So that everything, and they were the only, between them and the Russians, they were the only people that were going up high enough to do anything. So basically, you control the access to both the ceiling and the outer edge. Which, again, as I was looking, I was going, yeah, that's exactly how I would do it. With the limited resources you had at the time. So
okay. Now you mentioned Admiral Byrd.
Yes,
and he actually has a famous mission to the North Pole.
Yep.
Where he found a hole and
the whole Earth theory.
Big, giant Nazi people.
I got lucky with Admiral Byrd. Nazi people. Well, the Nazi people stuff were that was the Operation High Jump. We'll cover that later. But the Hollow Earth thing, that was from 1926, where he flew up there, and supposedly that's his big legend. Everyone knows he's known for the Hollow Earth theory. Most people don't know he's really known more. His body of work is in Antarctica, but. The Hollow Earth theory, which does not conflict with my model at all, was that he went up there and that at the North Pole, if there is, if the map is not perfectly flat, if it kind of bulges in the center, that he flew inside, an opening in the North Pole and supposedly went into, like a journey to the center of the earth type thing where he found, tropical stuff and another civilization. And, it's so limited, the information that's out there, but there's some neat stuff. If anyone's interested, please look up Hollow Earth. You'll find some neat stuff on that. But yeah, actually, Canary Cry Radio has an episode about Hollow Earth you can go listen to. There you go. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I had read and watched and listened a lot about Admiral Byrd and never heard anything about Antarctica. I know.
So
neither did I. And so, yeah, when I dug into it, I was like, of course it was Admiral Byrd. Who else would it be? And,
so the summation of the Antarctica thing is that Antarctica is the outer edge of the planet or the world, I guess, whatever you call it. Yeah. And so what does a map of the world look like at this point?
Perfect. Because, number 3, and everything kind of built on each other when I was doing the clues. So number 3 is Map Makers. And what that did was it showed people what the map is of an enclosed system, what the top-down view is. And so if you look up on Wiki, and it was very interesting when I was digging into it, when you look up the Wiki list of map projections, you'll see a whole bunch of projections on there. But the one that was interesting, about, 2/3 of the way down, was called and I hate this name, but I got to say it, is the azimuthal equidistant map. And
why? What is that? Why is it called that? Why is it so crazy?
Why is there a current classroom map called the Mercator? Well, it was named after a guy named Mercator. But the azimuthal equidistant map was proposed 1,000 years ago, and this is not a wiki error. You can feel free to click on the links. Proposed 1,000 years ago by a Persian scientist named al-Biruni. That's not his full name. That's the short version of his name. He was a scientist, lived 1,000 years ago when everyone knew the Earth was flat. However, what's interesting about that map is when you look at it, it's a top-down view, like if you're looking from the North Pole and you squished a globe into the floor to where the continents kind of spread out. So, to take into account Antarctica, you have to stretch Antarctica around the entire edge like a circle, which is very, very interesting. And the reason why that's interesting is 3 parts. One is it's currently used in the USGS, that's the United States Geological Survey catalog, for a representation of the world. 2, it is the exact map of the United Nations flag, which was completed in 1946. The only difference there between the United Nations flag, though, and this map is the United Nations flag doesn't have Antarctica on it, which is very, very interesting. And they also don't talk about it on their website. The outside of the United Nations flag, everybody knows, has that big pair of wreaths, spiky wreaths going around the outside. And it's like, okay, maybe that's what they mean, but they don't reference it. But it is also, that map is used by the United States government, the United Nations, and the Flat Earth Society. If you go to Wiki Flat Earth Society, you'll see the same map. If you scroll down, it is identical to the azimuthal map, but it is not linked. It is not called the azimuthal map. You cannot link it back to it. And that map is considered insane. It is because they say, well, it's not literal. All right. Well, then why are you using it for a flag? And why is the United States government using it? But so when I was going into map makers, I was like, okay, I'm finding more and more of these curious things. And for me, the United Nations flag just, it screamed out that, there were certain societies and government groups that knew full well ahead of time, what the world looked like. But until they found it for themselves, they didn't really know. And I think they jumped the gun in 1946, when they made the United Nations flag. They figured, well, we're going to find it sooner or later. And they did, less than 10 years later. But that's what Map Makers was all about. It was a fairly short video, but I think it got across the point, another one of those head scratcher things.
Yeah. So you had proposed at some point along the way, I think in one of your interviews, that you can conduct a test to see if this model is actually real or not. And it had something to do with a couple ships going in different directions or something.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, it was something I came up with because, some of the Flat Earth guys, notably Matt from the NASA channel, he wants to take boats and hike across the ice and go into Antarctica. It's like, dude, they're never going to let you go, but that's fine. And so I was trying to come up with a way that wouldn't involve violating any treaties. And so what you do is you take two boats, two cold weather boats, can survive glancing off an iceberg without sinking. You have them facing in opposite directions. You start them in the exact same spot. Let's pick a 6 o'clock position. Let's say if you're looking at the azimuthal map as a clock face, you put them both in the same spot. One goes clockwise, the other goes counterclockwise, and you make sure they're within binocular distance of the shore. That way, in case the GPS system starts acting weird, you still know you're on course. Well, if Antarctica is what they say it is, and it's only a little bit bigger around than say Australia, then those ships, depending, let's say they're doing 16, 18 knots, maybe they should meet each other in a week, maybe. But the disparity between the azimuthal map and the globe, as far as the surface, the shoreline of Antarctica is so huge that those ships could go for technically, I think, a month and not meet each other if that was the case. And so, yeah, you could prove it. Wouldn't even take that much to do. Yeah, two big ships and a whole lot of gas and maybe some refueling stops at some point, but it could be proved. Absolutely, I think it could, because you wouldn't even have to go to the point where those ships met each other, because if they didn't meet each other in say 2 weeks, you could just pull it up and say, well, obviously it's Antarctica is a lot bigger around than we thought. So,
and I mean, if my understanding is correct, Antarctica is thought to be humongous, like the biggest continent or something similar to that.
It depends what you look at. So like when you look at Google Earth, Antarctica looks a lot bigger than, but I have a globe in my place here, and Antarctica on that doesn't look that much bigger around than Australia. So yeah, there's some perspective issues. Yeah, but when you look on Google Earth and you spin it around, it's like Antarctica looks pretty big. But anyway, the boat thing would solve it, because regardless, the distance disparity would still be massive. Still could be proved that way, because people ask me, can you prove it? I go, yeah, you can prove it. Now, whether or not you would be allowed to prove it before someone drone striked one of those boats that you were on, that's a whole nother thing. But anyway,
let's jump to clue 4. I mean, you have you talk about Shell Beach, and I'm just going to let you run with it.
Yeah, Shell Beach is an inside joke. It is based on, because there are several movies out there in the past, and of course, if you believe in predictive programming, there's been a lot of interesting stuff recently. But Shell Beach was based on a 1998 movie called Dark City, done, I think, in New Zealand or Australia, which talked about a very, very small enclosed world, only the size of a city, and that it was circular, and they built the buildings literally up to the edge, and they kept confusing people, altering their memories to where they didn't know they were an enclosed system. They just thought they were living in a city. And Shell Beach was a mythical beach that everybody had a memory of, but nobody knew how to get there. And so that's where I kind of built off of it on. So I used Dark City as an example, but the one that, of course, everybody relates to because it did so well in the theaters and it was well reviewed, was The Truman Show. Right. Which was, from a simulation standpoint, I was saying what can be done. And, The Truman Show, the dome structure, if everyone remembers I think it was also 1998. The Truman Show was less than 20 miles wide, and it went along those lines of, if you have a person that's born into a system like that, will they believe it? Absolutely, they would. And, the show, because of the plot twist they threw in there, he discovered that he was in a giant dome-like structure. Now, what was interesting about that for me was that you didn't even, as you made a Truman Show bigger and bigger, let's just say you expanded it to 100 miles or 500 miles or 1,000 miles, things actually from a design standpoint got easier. Yeah, you'd have to build, the structure, and then that'd be a lot, but if that wasn't a main concern, all the little things on the inside got easier, because you wouldn't need many actors. Because once people were born into the system and you had a generation or two involved, you didn't even need to. You didn't need actors at all. Once you got to a certain size, it just became self-perpetuating, which was fantastic. And I even I threw in that M. Night Shyamalan movie there, The Village, to prove my point. It's like, look, we can do this now without a dome. You can raise kids in literally any sort of simulated environment you want, and they will believe it. Because because we're conditioned. It's like, why would anyone lie to us? The same thing goes along with the globe in the classroom. They are going to believe the globe in the classroom, because why would their teacher, why would our parents, why would anyone lie about the globe? So that's what Shell Beach really dug into. And in addition, I throw out the weird little predictive programming stuff that's been out lately, like the TV series Under the Dome, the Simpsons movie where the whole city was trapped under the dome, the Signal, the city that was flying in space that was under a dome. There's a bunch of references out there that are very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And shows what can be done.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff, it sounds good in theory, but you're talking to a highly, what's the word? A highly conditioned spherical worlder here.
Okay.
But how do you explain basically everything that we see in the sky, like stars and the sun going around, and the moon and the telescopes and the satellites? Where are the satellites?
All right. Well, I'll go backwards just a few seconds. And it's like, all right, you remember that part in the Truman Show where he said, cue the sun? And he brought the sun up, 3 hours early? When it comes, and we have the technology to do this in a limited sense now. Look at your planetariums. Look at your computer games. Have you ever been to Disneyland? You guys are down there. Go to the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. That ride is old, and you go into that one scene and you got the sky. It's done beautifully, and I really enjoy looking over through the water and trying really hard to see the wall.
Yeah, it's my biggest pastime on that ride.
Me too. I love when going in that ride, going into the big arena thing, and I was going, wow. And we got to remember that ride was built in the 50s.
Yeah.
It is amazing what we can do, even what we can do now, from a simulation standpoint. So to answer your question, if you could build a structure that was thousands of miles wide, if you had the technology to do that, the projection systems would put our LED technology to shame. Yeah. And simulating stars from a 2 and 3D point of view would not be hard, in my opinion. Now, to that effect, though, because people will ask, what about the sun and the moon? Sun and the moon are much larger objects, and they're much larger in the sky. So for those in your classic enclosed world model, those are actually 3-dimensional objects.
Yeah.
And
you talk about the stars or whatever as everything being a simulation.
Yes.
Now, are you suggesting there's an actual simulation happening, or is there an actual sun and an actual moon and actual stars, just not as we understand them? But I don't think you're trying to say that the Illuminati has built a giant sky for us to look at.
No. Whoever's painted the giant, beautiful tapestry that is the stars and the planets, which is really just a giant clock combination, beautiful piece of artwork and clock system. Right. The Illuminati, they wish they had direct control over this. This is big stuff. The sun. In the enclosed model is a 3-dimensional projection system. I know people will say, well, when I say, well, it's like a giant freaking light bulb in a cage, that may be too simple of an answer, but it gets their head around it. It's a very, very bright projection system, and the moon also appears to be a projection system, which also seems to be having some conflicts recently with our HD camera technology. If you guys have caught any of the the lunar waves
777.
Yeah,
lunar
and
wave.
I know the flat Earth people come at me. They say you can't talk about him because he's not a flat Earther. I'm just going, look, he has the best moon footage I've ever seen. And you want to cast doubts on the moon and where we live? Look at that stuff. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, just along the lines of what Basil asked. A couple things. First off, they have, I guess they've done experiments or scientific experiments where they send lasers out into space and they do, all kinds of infrared and different sorts of projections out there.
Sure.
How, and then they're sort of gaining data back. How are they reading that? And then also the second question is, the movement of the sun and the moon and just the celestial objects.
Yes.
Mathematically speaking, can accommodate a spherical, heliocentric sort of model. Is that part of, are you suggesting that that's part of a clock thing, or is it just is that part of the deception? Like what?
It's part of the illusion, and I firmly believe, and I've stated this in other interviews, but I'll restate it here, which is it is absolutely my belief that at one point, whoever built this structure wanted us to go down the globe path, the globe model path, because it buys time. From a technology standpoint, it lets civilization act like it changes the game. Meaning, if you don't want people to run for the fence, and I covered that in I think it was the status quo, which is number 5. So we'll kind of talk about that now.
Wait. I'm sorry to go off track. I'm just trying to get clear.
Yeah.
So you are suggesting that it is a simulation and not just nature.
You mean like a digital simulation?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to see who's behind all this.
A real actual contained physical world. Now, I don't want to get into the, we probably shouldn't split hairs on what matter is and what it isn't.
Sure.
But because people will start losing people. No, I'm saying like a giant terrarium. A physical terrarium. However, the terrarium that has, that simulates a vast universe above it.
Right.
But everything down on the ground is about as real as you can get. I mean, yeah, there's still some stuff that's kind of played with, but it's about as real as it can get. Holograms aren't on the ground.
But it is trying to trick us.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's trying to trick you, because you got to get to a point in which I talked about in status quo, which was number 5, which was people act differently than the other creatures of the world, like, in an animal preserve. People in animals in an animal preserve act perfectly naturally because it's a very vast system. It's hundreds of square miles and even if not thousands in some case. But if you put a human in that, eventually they're going to reach the edge. And if they reach the edge, that's when the problems start, because people don't like being contained. We all know that. There's a reason why jails are avoided for the most part. And so at one point you have to hide the edge entirely. You make the bars or whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying it's a jail, but you make the edges invisible. You have the climate, get more and more aggressively harsh once you get out to the edges. But the big thing is you make them believe that the globe model is there, because that way they don't even look for the edge. Because otherwise, if that flat map was still around even a couple hundred years ago, leaders and empires would be dedicated to try to find, to map out their world. But if you say it's a globe, they're not going to look for it, because at that point there's nothing to look for. It's like, we'll just go in circles and circles and nothing ever is going to happen because it's a globe.
Yeah.
And that I feel that was good. That was a natural process that was supposed to be discovered at a certain point. And the authority, if you want to call it, the super rich or the governments or royalty or, the Illuminati or whoever you want, at that point, they decided to keep it going artificially. I think even they didn't know for sure, because they didn't even have the technology to see it for themselves. But in 1956, all that changed. And then they made the decision. It's like, you know what, let's just keep things, the status quo. We're not going to change it. We're not going to give any power back to religion. We're not going to, let people develop spiritually. We're going to keep this going as long as we can.
Right. Okay. You actually outline in that status quo video, you sort of project on how things would play out in your perspective. Can you sort of share with us what?
Yeah. Initially I had thought, and I kind of tempered that by the time I got to number 10, Hiding God, which was, I talked about how, if you're coming from a government science background, the people that are discovering this, what happens when, because all the religions of the world, the big 5, but all of them really want their version of the Holy Grail. And what if they had because everybody's looking for that mystical object, that object that can solidify spiritual faith. What if everybody got that object at the same time? Well, governments wouldn't necessarily be in trouble. Not then, but science would might take it on the chops for a while. And even though I think the authority in question would be able to recover, it would take some years to do, and there'd have to be a lot of retooling. I don't think they wanted to deal with it. Men, there's a saying, men really won't, are resistant to giving up power. And even if that power is just a transitional shift. And so what I was basically, it was really a warning to religion in general, saying, look, this happens. You don't want to go down that road of, science is the root of all evil. We should burn down all our universities and do all that. But that would be a big concern. If you're the authority, if you're the government, are you going to roll those dice? They don't take chances like that. And so for them, even if they found the firmament, even if they found a structure with the handprint of God on it, that is something that would benefit them to hide.
Yeah.
And to keep the status quo.
Right.
Which is why I did it.
Now, I hope this isn't off track too much, but if we're on a flat Earth or a, whatever you want to call it,
Truman
Show, what's underneath it?
Excellent.
Like in what space is this being, and what shelf is it sitting on?
And that I talked about in depth perception somewhat, but we'll talk about this now. What it's sitting on, and a lot of people have asked me, one, how thick would it have to be? And so when I went to depth perception, I went into the basic layout. I reviewed, it's like, okay, take the azimuthal map, continents in the center, saltwater ocean around, that fills everything in, which is great from an exploring standpoint because it reduces ocean exploration by like 95%. And all of that took was 3% salt solution. That's fantastic. You take the increasing cold on the outer edge, decrease in oxygen levels when you go up, and a decrease in temperature. But the enclosed world itself would also have to, for me, it was obvious that this system has been used for, we're not the first people in this system by any stretch. And this system probably sits on a much bigger system. Some people said, well, is it, I love how people follow the globe model. It's like, is our world just a flat, a flattish world that's sitting on top of a bigger globe? It's like, yeah, maybe, but it doesn't have to be a globe, but is it sitting next to a whole bunch of other globes, on a giant, massive structure with ice in between these circular pockets of life?
Right.
Very, very possible. And so,
kind of has a multiverse feel to it.
Yeah. And is it, again, I didn't want to get into the Russian stacking doll argument, but because, you start to lose people, it's like, are there more dimensions literally sitting on top of this one? So, are we in a fixed, circular, dome-ish system that have more domes on top?
Right.
It's a fascinating concept, but I try to do it one world at a time.
Do you have like a calculation or an idea how tall you think this dome goes? I mean, you mentioned the Van Allen belts.
That's funny you'd mention that, because that is one of those point of contentions that even the Flat Earth societies, the different groups disagree on in wide ranges, because even though the government, you could look up like high altitude nuclear explosions. So when the United States and Russia started doing their high altitude nuclear tests in 1957, and they ended in 1958, and they ended at the end of 1962. They seemed for like the last 2.5 years that they were just probing the shape of this thing, like what you were saying. And the highest ones I saw on that, I think, were about 400 kilometers. So, and that would be, you wouldn't need, it doesn't have to be that standard snow globe, that giant high arcing thing, because the technology is really limited on the ground. Planes cap out at 10 miles, roughly, commercial aircraft. Spy planes, depending on who you talk to, maybe 20 miles. And then after that, you wouldn't need that much. So it wouldn't be like a snow globe. It'd be like a shallow sports stadium. That's a good analogy, because if it's really, really wide and it's only 400 miles high, that's a pretty shallow dome, but that does all you need. There's so much efficiency that appears to be built into this. Why waste the space? So for me, I'm saying 400 miles or less. There are other people that say, 1,000 miles. It's like, whatever.
So you don't think that there is an actual sort of like outer space where there is no gravity? You kind of float around?
That's an excellent point. And people have asked me that a lot. And I say, because again, that reinforces the globe model. And I say, look, yeah, you could have space, but you don't need it.
Right.
You could have just a giant room on the outside, or as some people have pointed out, because of all the ice falling and the stories of all the great floods, it's like, what if this dome is a sealed underwater system? And they use the Genesis thing, the waters separating the waters from Genesis 1:7, if I'm not mistaken. So at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, either way, I don't think it's space. Whether it's an open room or area with more pockets of this, and it's a cold weather environment, whether it's an open, it's a free range system, either way you could go with it. But
so I guess according to some Science and Space Foundation info, low Earth orbit is somewhere between 124 and 1,240 miles above the Earth's surface, something like that. Yeah. So do you think that, like the International Space Station and stuff like that is it up there? Is it actually floating up there, or are they?
Yeah. All right. You
just sounded disgusted.
I'm sorry. There's the ISS, unfortunately.
ISS, gross.
The ISS, the International Space Station, has the footage that's been coming out of there recently is, from a production standpoint, embarrassing. It is so, the people, for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, please look up ISS hoax on YouTube and watch the videos. There's three things I'll point out, the three obvious ones from a production standpoint, and this will answer your question. The first one is, why is every shot on the ISS no bigger than a commercial jet airliner, which coincidentally is how they simulate, and they're fully, you can take tours, you can do this yourself. There's private companies that do this. In 727, it's called the Vomit Comet, and that where they simulate how they train astronauts in zero gravity. That's the first thing. It's like, why is no section ever wider than the commercial jet airliner? It's a big space station. You don't have a mission control room. You don't have a bridge like in Star Trek. You can make these rooms whatever size you want. Just connect them together. Second thing is, why are there no hatches between the sections? This is like a submarine, all right? There should be doors between all these sections. And when you see them flying around, and they do it really, really quick because it's limited time and simulated gravity, why are there no hatches? If what you're saying there is there's no safety backup, you get a single micrometeor, if you believe in this whole space thing, micrometeor, that whole station is doomed. If you have no hatches and people are just, you should be in a spacesuit at all times, right? The third one, the part that just sunk, and everybody can see this, is, just look up permed hair. The women, at one point, they decided, during the simulation, they were going to perm their hair, the ones with long hair, and let them, do interviews. And it's horrible. It is so awful. And it was the least, it's like, what, you couldn't pull the hair back? You couldn't make them wear a hat. You couldn't make them cut their hair. In fact, the brunette lady, who was called Medusa in one of those hoax videos, she actually cut her hair just like a month ago. Cut it real short, because I'm sure they said, because hers looked the worst of all, because they didn't perm up the way, it looked like snakes.
But that's to make it simulate low gravity or something?
Yeah. Well, or no gravity.
Have and it be bouncy?
Well,
it'd be a great hair commercial.
The problem they had with that, and I know why they did it. Not why they permed the hair, but I know why they. Again, that was the last option they should have chosen. The reason is if you look on the normal flight simulators, those 727 simulators with women, is because it's kind of like underwater, where a woman's head will move one way or the other, and then the hair will follow like a trailer. So you can kind of it's like, wait, why did she move to the left so suddenly? Why did she move to the right? And that's part of the question. It's like the ISS should be the most stable place ever. And yet there's these weird little gravity jostles where all of a sudden it's like the whole place is being bumped. And if you follow it, it's like, well, yeah, it's turbulence because they're in a freaking plane, because you can't see turbulence, even with our advanced technology. Anyway, so to answer your point, when it comes to satellites and anything that's up there, it's like, okay, if we have the technology to do the ISS, and fine, if you say you can see the ISS in a telescope, fantastic. Why are they faking people up there? Why do you have to do that? Why not just make it real? Why fake it? And if you're faking that, how in the world can I trust any satellites? In fact, anything above spy planes, in my opinion, I have huge doubts.
Right. And actually, I think I've seen, I don't know about the specific ones you mentioned, but I've seen footage from allegedly the ISS or something, something in low Earth orbit. And the guy says something to the effect of like, we're flying over Boston or something like that. And,
yeah. There was a girl. I think I know what you're talking about. A guy probably did it too, but there was a girl that they were doing like a morning show, like a live thing. And she actually said where they were calling from, where they, it's like, really?
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
It's like, and who doesn't edit that out? Why in the world would you I mean, honest to God, the director from that should just be fired, just fired outward. It's really awful.
Now, just before we continue on with the clues, though, how do you think that? I mean, do these people know that they're lying to the world? I mean, what? Like, I don't know. I think
they don't know why they're lying. It's not that serious. Meaning, the original astronauts, the Apollo astronauts, I think were kind of like the Capricorn 1 guys, where they had to let them in on it. It's like, okay, here's the deal. You're not going up there. We knew you wanted to be heroes, and they were going to be, that's why they signed up. But and most of them were on board. A couple weren't. They're not with us anymore.
Yeah.
And, but when it comes to all the new people, they're just Air Force employees. They just sign a non-disclosure agreement. They don't even have the right to ask why. So it's like, look, you're going to go up here. You're going to do this. You're going to say your lines, and that's it. And no, I have no doubt in the world that they don't know why they're doing it, but at the same time, they've signed a non-disclosure to where they're just going to do it, and they're not going to ask, and they'd be smart not to ask.
Yeah, if they want to keep their job, yeah.
So, just while we're on the subject of satellites and things floating around, I mean, we have so much technology that allegedly relies on satellites. Cell phones and GPS and things like that. Like, why even tell us that they're satellites? Why not?
That probably goes into your next clue, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, it does go into the long haul.
Like, why don't we just have towers or something and just forget about satellites?
Unfortunately, once you start, it's that tangled web syndrome, and that is once you start the lie, any technology that builds on the lie, you have to perpetuate as well. And I'm sorry, because there's a lot of money that's been spent and burned probably, on stuff that isn't actually used. But the GPS system, which went online, I believe in 1995, in my humble opinion, was designed no different than NASA, was designed with the sole purpose of keeping this thing about as far under wraps as you can, because one, it reinforces the globe model just with the title alone, the global positioning system. But two, the global positioning system, which was designed, created, by the United States military, the Department of Defense, it is a military system. It tells you not only where you are, but where they want you to think you are. So for the most part, it works great, right? Supposedly. Do I think it involves satellites? No, I don't. And here's why. When it gets to the southern hemisphere, which what I talked about in the long haul, that again, it came down to, remember I was saying, how would you hide something like this? There's certain rules that apply. One, the space program has to be absolutely fabricated from day one. Two, there can be no actual NASA certified photographs of the Earth, because you can never get that high, you can never get that far away to actually take a picture. But the big one, the one it's super fun, is that if you're using an azimuthal map, the map changes the dimensions of certain oceans. Meaning, if you're in the northern hemisphere in the azimuthal map, it's not that exaggerated, because you can, even though it's really interesting, like how you're flying from San Francisco, like over to Japan, you're hugging Alaska for some reason, but on an azimuthal map, it's a straight shot. On an azimuthal map, there are the two farthest points on that map are Australia and South America. And those two spots should not, they are exaggerated. Meaning, if you tried to take on a globe, if you're flying from Australia to South America, you just go across the South Pacific. It's a 7,400 miles. It's a quick trip. Shouldn't be that big a deal at all. But if you're using a literal azimuthal map, then that ocean, South Pacific, becomes really, really stretched on the outside. So you can't take the ocean, which means you have to take a shortcut, which means you have to take a flight that doesn't make any sense on a globe. And for people that don't know what I'm talking about, try to book a flight from, say, Buenos Aires to Sydney, Australia. There's no reason why that flight should connect through Los Angeles or San Francisco. It's on a globe, it makes absolutely no sense. But on the azimuthal map, it's almost an exact straight line. And statistically speaking, that is way out there. There's no, the fact that it's a straight shot, it gives so much more credence to that map. And that happens all the time. Flights that'll go, to the Middle East. And then back down, these big triangles. But if you look at them from an azimuthal map, they're just short little dog legs. They're way more efficient. So when I was looking at the long haul, that's the first thing I told people is like, look, try to get a nonstop flight in the Southern Hemisphere. And, you're going to get all these connections, which is exactly what you would do. It was what I would do. And that is you have to hide the distance somehow and you have to hide the routes. So the only way to hide a route, so instead of cutting across, just cutting across nonstop through the middle of the map for no apparent reason, is you make these little connections that it's like, oh, we're going to pick up people. Oh, it's because it's a hub partner or an alliance partner or whatever. And that's what it was. And so there was just a handful of nonstop flights in the Southern Hemisphere, stuff that we take, for granted up in the Northern Hemisphere. And let me connect to number 9, which was, because I said that, there was a lot of people that wrote me and said, oh yeah, people's logic just slays me. How they just dismissed the fact that 95% of the flights in the Southern Hemisphere were connections. That didn't bother them. It's like, wow, there's obviously these nonstops. It's like, okay, fine. So I looked at some of these nonstops, and I was looking at some of the real-time GPS-based flight things, and one was called planefinder.net. That was my favorite, and I was watching these planes. I was looking, I was like, okay, how are they doing this? How are they hiding this? Which is why I called number 9 the magic show. And I was watching these planes leave South America more specifically, and as they got over water, they disappeared. And they were dropped off the GPS system entirely. And their logs were also changed on the individual flights. They were changed to estimated, they were changed to approximate. And I was going, wait a minute, it's a GPS system. Why is this being dropped? And I was going, I get it. It was being dropped because they don't want to show you the routes. However, the people came back to me afterwards, after they saw that clue, and they said, maybe it's even more serious than that. Maybe they can't cover anything in the South Hemisphere, because if you're trying to hide the fact that the satellite system can't hide it, physically cannot do it, then even your tower, fiber optic, radar stuff, even that is stretched to the limit to where you can't do anything. And I was going, well, either way, either they're lying and covering it up, or the system doesn't exist in the first place. Either way, it's bad news, both ways, but it was fascinating. So, the GPS system, completely in doubt. It hides the planes from the point, when they get over water to within an hour of their destination, then they pop back on the screen and then they're there. And I was going, that's exactly how I do it. Yeah, because you don't want people looking at the routes.
Well, it can sure get me to Home Depot on time from where I'm at now.
The Northern Hemisphere, not that bad. Not that bad.
That's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I get it. I see where we're going here.
All right. So, we want.
Well, let's just go. It seems like you skipped a clue. We went
I did
7 to 9. So
creative force.
Fill in the gap here.
That was my pick-me-up vid, because I had a lot of people that were emailing me and calling and saying, "Look, you just changed us from a small speck and insignificant speck in the middle of a giant universe to like a one-room apartment, and I'm getting small world syndrome." I'm going, all right. I go, one, I think it's a very nice one-room apartment. It's very intimate. So what I did was creative force. I really talked about. I tried to give people kind of a pick-me-up story where, I opened with the, even though I never said it by name, I opened with the Tower of Babel story from an enclosed world, which was I think it was very interesting because, I went to Sunday school a lot, and that story bugged me from a globe standpoint, because, the Tower of Babel story, if everyone knows, the tower that's supposed to reach to heaven by one of the very old civilizations, not ours. that doesn't make any sense on a globe because one, it's not going anywhere, and two, the globe's spinning around, so it's constantly moving.
Right.
It's like, what the heck? But from an enclosed standpoint, like a Truman Show, that story makes a lot more sense.
Right.
They have purpose. They have ambition, and so I kind of spun it like that, and I had so many people are saying that was Babel you were talking about, right? It's like yes, thank you for picking up on that. But at the end, I kind of delved into Creative Force, like why something like this would be built.
Yeah,
and I touched on the fact that humanity, for me, our big shining light, our big redeeming feature seemed to be our creative force. The fact that we can create so many beautiful things. Yes, there's a lot of ugliness in the world, a lot of hate, but there's so much good, wonderful, beautiful, inspiring things that we create. And so that's what and everybody's a part of that same system.
Right.
And by the time in fact, it was funny because when I was making Creative Force, I remember thinking about the narrative as soon as I woke up, and I was getting kind of emotional. I was going, yep, absolutely. That's what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
So,
what's interesting, and this is just a little Basil rant here, which is in an enclosed world, an enclosed system, that would solve a lot of problems for time travel. Just saying, because a big problem that I've been trying to get through is time and movement are connected, and you're trying to move through time. The Earth, the globe, hypothetical globe, Earth,
moving through space
is moving through space. So if you go back 100 years, you're just going to be floating in space where the Earth used to be. Blah blah blah. But if it's not moving, time travel. Boom. Solved it, everyone. We've been following my journey for time travel for like 3 years now. And you've opened my eyes.
Nice. And you're right. It would be mathematically way simpler. Yeah. Because nothing's moving. Yeah, you don't have oh my God, that takes out so many equations.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's great. That's the first time anyone's ever mentioned that. To me, that's fantastic.
Boom. Yeah. Exclusive interview. You heard it here.
Time travel solved.
Time travel solved by the flat Earth theory.
If anyone's listening, that from a physics standpoint, that is a fascinating thing because you can imagine like some professor listening to his podcast right now going, holy smokes, it's not it's not moving. He like crosses off like massive sections of the planet. He's like, that's it, and
just
that's the
time
last
travel comes out like next year.
Yeah.
Commercialized and everything. It becomes a normal part of life.
Nice.
Okay. All right. Good. Now that we got that out of the way. Now, okay. I'm totally following.
Okay.
I'm totally following now.
Okay.
But now comes the really humongous questions, which is, first of all, who?
Yep.
And second, why?
Okay.
Tell me. Tell me now.
All right, the next 20 minutes, we're going to wrap up the entire meaning of life. So turn your dial. And you would not, and you'd think that's a silly question. And a lot of people have sent that one to me. It's like, who did it? It's like one, if I actually knew, don't you think it'd be kind of a spoiler, to tell you outright?
Well, to be honest though, because you do talk about it in a way that, that it's a simulation, and you talk in vocabulary that's, whoever's doing this and whoever made it and what. Let's just, we'll call it your best idea.
Okay. All right. I will go into my best idea.
Which you have a green light.
Which segues into hiding God, because that's number 10 clue. And this, this caught me a little bit of controversy, but not too much, because I was really talking about, because you have to answer that question in two parts. The first part is, why would you hide it? And I was really calling out whistleblowers and trying to get people to see if, to branch out and look, somebody knows somebody who knows, something about this. And for me personally, you have to define what it is first, which was, let's say, I was raised in a very strong Christian family. And so if you go down the firmament path, and I know all the other religions have their own, version of this, but if you go down the path of the firmament, then if the firmament is actually found, let's say it is found in 1956, not maybe a literal handprint of God on the wall, but at that point, you're talking about the authority hiding creation from you, or evidence of, not just evidence of intelligent design, but evidence, physical evidence of creation or the creator themselves. So when I got to create a, hiding God, it was, why would you do this, and do you have a stake in it? And so I was really calling out to, anyone who is a spiritual person. I said, look, you have a stake in this. If you want to know more about the meaning of life, you really need to know, because knowing this, having the revelation of this come to light, if it was an enclosed system, if there is a piece of God's handiwork out there, this will help you at least get one step closer to answering, the questions that we all ask ourselves before we go to sleep, which is, why am I here?
Right.
That whole thing. So to your question though, more specifically, everything that I saw from a creator standpoint seemed to dovetail back to inspiration, and for me, it seemed to be that it obviously was not a prison, because again, if it was a prison, it would be it'd be more miserable. And you think, oh no, it's pretty miserable. It's like, no, actually the world is a very, very beautiful and inspiring place. The only things that seem to be doing any damage to each other are us. That stupid line from Mr. Smith in The Matrix, that we're the only beings out at dawn here that don't seem to fit in with the rest of the system.
Right.
But the world can only really be, and I know this oversimplifies it, can only really be one of three things. It can either be or a combination of these things. Either it be entertainment, an education process, or confinement. If it was totally entertainment, more people would be having fun, and they don't seem to be. However, from an education standpoint, and that's what I'm really leaning towards. From a creation standpoint, the creators, are we talking about an omnipotent creator? And I don't want to go too far into that, or did God subcontract this out? Are we talking, this could be an education system where we are, just trying to develop spiritually, trying to learn more. We come in knowing some things and we go out, hopefully knowing more than we do now. Is it a part of, is it a soul selection process? Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's just, learning the ropes, heck, I like to think that we actually volunteered for this.
Right.
Where this is just part of something that, just another section of a giant journey where unfortunately we were forced to forget most of, everything that was before this. And people say, oh, what are you talking about? It's like, okay, think about it this way. If you're on an amusement park ride, you're mostly safe. It's an amusement park ride. Everything's bolted in. You're not going to fall off, for the most part. But imagine if you woke up on that amusement park ride. Right? If you woke up on a roller coaster or whatever it was, and you had no memory of how you got there, that changes the entire perspective, because then you don't know the conditions of where you are. You may be very, very safe, but you don't know that. This world is it seems to be open-ended, but it may not be. There may be a lot of closed systems that we just, we aren't allowed to see. So that for me is I try to stay on the positive side. I try not to go down the sinister side. Some people have said, well, maybe the first people that were enclosed as, that were part of this system, maybe they were the fallen ones and they've been looking for a way to get out. And, they're hoping that a civilization can crack the code for them. And, so that we're, coming up with stuff like the atomic weapons and HARP and the CERN system. And we're, it's a big jailbreak movie.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, it's not bad. I could actually see that being produced by somebody in Hollywood, but I don't know. But anyway, let me get to this though, because for me, I thought there was more of a message here. I think that because by the time I got to 11 Souls in the System, I talked about that this is the only conspiracy out there that could actually be turned into something good. Because if it is an enclosed world, and maybe this was supposed to happen eventually, maybe it's the reason why in 2015 we're getting all this traction on it. If it is an enclosed system, then there's a real possibility that if it is revealed to everybody at once, that the world becomes better. And I know it's too simple a word. What I mean is that people, if they realize they're accountable for their actions, if there's a scorecard with their name on it, whether it's real or not, it's that perceived goodness. The line is fine. Everyone's run a red light before, but if there's a stoplight camera on that light, you don't run it. And you say, well, why don't you run it? Well, because I might get caught. And then I say, well, why were you thinking about running it in the first place? Right. The argument, it's the Santa Claus argument. And that is the naughty and nice list don't mean anything until you see Santa Claus in your living room eating cookies.
Right.
And then that all changes. And so for me, I tried to turn this into a very, very positive thing. And that was even calling out the governments and the authority themselves, or the Illuminati, whoever's listening, and saying, look, you will not get lynched if someone comes forward and says, look, you're in an enclosed system, you're in a Truman Show. Because even though the initial reaction by the public is, oh, we're absolutely going to lynch you, they can't, because now they're under the accountability clause, which is, would anyone do anything malicious to anybody else if they knew there was a chance that they were being graded on it? And I said, look, wars would end, hate crimes would end, burglaries, murder. No one would, except for the psychopaths. All the bad things, would you kidnap anybody? Are you gonna, unless your life depended on it, would you do anything malicious towards somebody else? And for me, the answer was no. And so it was it was like a real emotional journey, because when I got there, it's like, look, everything can be better if something like this was actually came out. It would not be this horrible people running through the streets with their hands in the air, screaming, burning down buildings type of moment. Everyone would walk outside, they'd look up, and they'd ponder their universe and themselves for hours, if not days, trying to figure out how to act next.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I pulled up, and I'm sure you've come across this, Isaiah 40, verses 21 through 23. And it's very interesting because, I'll just read it. It says, do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in, who brings the princes to nothing and makes the rulers of the earth as emptiness. Yeah. So, I mean, that sort of plays into the whole idea.
Or there's so many other quotes you could have in there, like how many times they mention, like, the earth is fixed, or the world is fixed, the world is immovable. Not that it's moving 60,000 miles an hour through space, not that not that the solar system is also moving at 70,000 miles an hour in a corkscrew direction. There's lots of religious references, especially in Christianity, that talk about how the world is fixed. Yeah, the circle upon the earth. Yeah, people say, well, that could mean a globe. It's like, well, then why didn't he say globe or ball? It's not like the sphere was a complete foreign concept when that thing was written.
Right. Actually, yeah, right. I have heard that argument that they did have a word for sphere, so if they wanted to use that, they could have. But yeah,
absolutely, they could.
But let me ask you this. This is a little bit, I guess it sort of ties in with everything, but because our show, we number one, we are a Christian show, and number two, we dive into just the absolute crazy stuff, and I mean, this is not out of the realm of that, but
this is not the craziest, but it's not the craziest.
Yeah. Really. But I want a couple things. First off, and we'll go one at a time, but I want to tie in your perspectives on for example, supernatural or metaphysical intelligences, like for example, angels or, demons, ghosts, that kind of thing. Like, what is your opinion of that? And how does it, does it shape or influence your, worldview in terms of this, sort of a enclosed world model?
Everything that I have run into when it comes to that sort of concept, in fact, just about every concept, is way easier in an enclosed system. In fact, when it comes to, angels and demons and interdimensional beings and all that, it becomes way more intimate and easier because like the time travel thing, dimensional shifts become way easier in a fixed system. Mm-hmm. So, if we're talking about, everything from, the fallen ones, the angels falling from heaven, or, angels interacting with our civilization, so much easier from a frequency standpoint because you don't have to deal with anything else. But to answer your question, I don't think anything changes as far as semantics go. I think it just becomes, from a physical, tactical standpoint, a practical standpoint, it just becomes way, way easier for the angels. It's like they don't have to worry. Because if nothing's moving, the frequency, it's literally just like walking down a hallway.
With literally easier to get around.
Yeah, it's literally just a series of doors. Whereas before, it's like, okay, you're talking about, okay, are they following the Earth? Are they outside the solar system looking in? Are they constantly in a geosynchronous position? It gets trickier.
Yeah, but, that's interesting. I never really even thought about that.
Yeah, or I'll give you one more. Because I don't know if you would have mentioned it, there was I can't remember which chapter and verse it was, but when the second coming, it always bugged me because it was like, okay, everyone on the world sees the second coming at the same time. It's going, well, how does that work on a globe? It's like, but on an enclosed system, that becomes way, way easier, and then it's just like, everybody literally sees it at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. Now, go ahead.
Well, okay. I mean, just going with that, everybody sees it at the same time thing. Yeah. And we've kind of already covered it, the simulation of the sun and yada, yada, yada. But, eclipses are another thing that happened. They're like, well, you can't see it if you're in America. But if you were in China right now, you'd see an awesome eclipse. Yeah. That's how it always is. Yeah. But, fitting that into an enclosed system is a little bit harder unless, you just have...
A little bit trickier. Solar eclipses where the moon running in front of it. Yeah. You're going to run into those weird, which is why I still, again, flat earth guys, the purists will say, well, no, it's a two-dimensional object. It's like, look, if the moon is more of a three-dimensional object, that I think is real, where the sun, and don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, the moon fits exactly in front of the sun. Right. I love that. It's like somebody was lazy on that design. All right, I'm not saying lazy if God says. So I just think it's awfully convenient. Yeah. That with a three-dimensional, remember, because the moon can move both up and down, up and down, left and right. It can shift around. So the solar eclipses, that's fairly easy. The lunar eclipses, though, that's a little trickier because it's got to be all artificial. Because on a flat system, there is no Earth between. There is no ball between the sun and the moon. And again, I think Crow 777 did some neat stuff on the blood moon where, he's trying to explain. He's going, look, there's something wrong with the blood moon as well. I'm sorry, the lunar eclipse, that it looks artificial. And I was going, yeah, it has to be artificial. Absolutely.
Yeah. He was pointing out something about the solar eclipse, and he was talking about how you can see through the moon a little bit on the outer rims and stuff like that.
Yeah. Which is why some of the flat Earth guys will say, well, it's got to be two-dimensional because you could see, partially through it. I'm just going, well, yeah, but it doesn't have to be, there may be some flaws there, but I still think it's a three-dimensional object.
Right.
But anyway.
Right.
A couple more. I mean, I had a second part to that, but even before that, what has been the biggest challenge? Like what made you, after you decided that we're in a closed sort of flat Earth system, what made you think, maybe I'm wrong in the last, 8 to 9 months or something?
I wasn't. You mean what convinced me, or what, do I have doubts now?
Is there still a challenge? What was the biggest challenge for you personally?
Not as coming from a game background, I find it's actually getting easier.
Where you deal in I don't know, fake realities or closed systems.
Well, yeah. I mean, because people bring up, the altering of the drains, in the northern versus southern hemisphere. And for me, from a gaming standpoint, that's, just gravity wells using some sort of molecular magnetism and reversing the torque. I know that sounds a little scientific, but it's not hard we can do this now in simulations. When it comes to meteors, people ask me meteor questions. All the time. I'm going, look, that's easy. Just introduce a piece of metal at speed, from up above, and like a rifle bullet, and firing to make sure the angle's not too shallow. Make sure you don't hit any population centers, like that close call in Russia. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And there's a neat little video of like supposedly a UFO coming in at the last minute and blowing that, intervening. I was going, well, yeah, because somebody screwed up on that. If that was the case. When it comes to the sky, because people say, well, what you see in stars and different parts of the world. It's going, look, from a programming instance standpoint, we literally do that all the time. In fact, that's almost required in just about any game that's built now. So yeah, for me, it's gotten easier because everyone's thrown in these questions, and I've never gotten to a point, though, if that's what you're asking, where I've said a stickler, or I said, you know what? That, because that's how I started. That's how I started down this road. It was like, I'm just going to debunk this because there's no way I'm going to get over all the hurdles. There's no way I'm going to do it. It's obvious, it's ridiculous and ludicrous, but that's why, I chewed on it for more and more months. I was going, there's got to be something that I can't get around. And there was nothing, to the point where now it's like, okay, all we really need is literally by the time I got to number 10 and 11, I was like calling out the government saying, look, the jig's up. I've got this. I already know what you guys are doing. And I do not think this was supposed to be kept a secret forever. From their standpoint, I think, if they wanted to stop, because people said, won't they do like a staged event or something really big, or start a world wars, to keep people from learning? I was going, yeah, maybe, but maybe they'll do the right thing. Maybe they'll change the world for the better. And, I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Right. So. Right. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to every time I hear a rejection or maybe a challenge, it's usually centered around, I've been in airplanes. I know a guy in NASA. I know, it's never like, I don't know. I tend to see that it's never really a thorough addressing of some of the points you bring up. And maybe in time, there'll be something that makes us go, oh, well, that's a good point. But in general, I've seen that it's mostly, how dare you? I have a brother in NASA, and like that kind of thing.
Like when NASA called up Ground Zero, and NASA calling up Ground Zero after I'm off the air and saying, I can assure you it's round. And I was thinking, oh man, you guys were so lucky I was not on the air at that point, because I would have just come after you. It's like, really, because I feel so much better now. It's like, well, I can absolutely assure you. And let me throw in one more thing. Yeah, I know you ran out of time, but which was the point where in fact, I found this during my journey, where if you look up on Google, you can look up third-party evidence of Apollo moon landings, and NASA has gotten so slapped around, because the internet's just been shredding them. They have no chance from the internet hive mind, that they opened up a secondary wiki section called third-party evidence of Apollo moon landings. And literally it says at the top, third-party confirmation that is not NASA or the US government. And so it's basically saying, don't take our word for it. Here's other countries that will vouch that we went to the moon. And you look through it and it's horrible. They're just, they're not confirming anything. It's like, really, this is what it's come to? Right. Yeah. And I feel bad for NASA, but at the same time, look, you guys had a good run. But it's good 60 years, but it's time, guys, because at this point, nobody's buying it anymore. I mean, seriously, I think anybody under 25 is pretty much going, oh yeah. They're just,
that's an interesting one. We had, Buzz Aldrin recently come out and say we need to get to Mars. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that going on.
Yeah. Which reminds me, that is one thing that people got to remember, and that is NASA is the only organization. There is no government organization. There is no private enterprise that releases stories on such a clockwork pace as NASA does. every single month they release stories that make them seem more relevant. To the point it's like, we've got this probe going out, which means you're on a globe. We're going to do a new mission, which you're on a globe. There's a face on Mars. There's a weird thing on Saturn. Look at these pictures we did from Hubble. They do it so regularly to the point where it was that reality show thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to put people, we're going to send people to Mars in 2024. It's like, what? No, you're not. Yeah. you're not, because you can't, the technology, the hive mind detection technology keeps pace with NASA to the point now where they wouldn't dare fake anything like that now. They couldn't. It would be horrible. Right. Go to moviemistakes.com and then tell me you're going to do that. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. One last question, and again, our audience is mostly from a Christian worldview, and I would like to know, since you said you were brought up in that faith, and I don't know where you stand on it now, but what does the person who was Jesus and what he represented, what does that do for you in light of all of this?
I can't wait to meet him. How's that? Because I have a lot of design questions. When it comes to this, really, and I know it sounds, well, you don't talk to Jesus about, blueprints. And it's like, well, no, I think that's a very fair question, because I think he's tired of hearing the divine questions. I think he'd like to talk shop in some cases. And in this case, that's what I fully intend to do. I know it's going to sound totally geeky. It'll probably just wave me off.
That's funny.
Well, he is the carpenter. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Just geek out a little bit about.
Yeah. It's like, so how in the world did you come up with a jet stream, routine? It's like, it's fantastic. Cause for me, from a technical point of view, it becomes more and more awe-inspiring. Let's put it that way. You think that when you break it down, it becomes less inspiring. It's like, no, it becomes more, because there's so much detail involved that it's very humbling.
Fascinating. Wow. Well, you know what? I can tell you, I'm not going to say I'm convinced.
Wow, that I didn't convince you in an hour?
I'm not going to go that far. But I will say that it is very, very fascinating, very interesting, and really brings a whole new perspective that, the early conditioning and everything, honestly, just wouldn't even allow for.
Yeah.
When you walk outside, the next time you walk out there, just keep this conversation in mind, and
it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
It will trip you out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, but thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there any last words that you would like to share with this flat world that we're on?
Yeah.
Before we sign off.
Yeah. Ties into the last clue, souls in the system, which is really, I think there's some guidelines and rules to the world, but for me, there's really just one, and that is treat others better than you treat yourself.
Boom.
World will be a better place.
Boom. There it is, everybody. Flat or round. Go ahead and do it. Well, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for coming on the show, and hopefully,
my pleasure.
I know you've been going on some shows all over the place here, but we appreciate you taking some time out.
Yeah.
Next time we'll try to get you a little earlier so we can get you before everybody else.
I'm sorry.
And geez.
Again, it's only been 8 weeks. And so, yeah, it's been a wild, interesting ride so far.
Okay. Well, call us first next time.
Okay.
All right. Well, there you go. Mark Sargent, everybody. Where can they find your stuff?
Easy enough. Just Google Flat Earth Clues, 3 words. You don't have to do anything else. It'll take you.
You're just the one.
I'm the only guy. Nobody's trademarked it yet. Watch somebody do it and not be me. But we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark, for coming on the show. Everybody check out his stuff. And when you've got more, we'll have you back on, buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, so there you go, everybody. Make sure to scoop up your brains and slide it back into your ears as they've been melting out this past hour and a half.
I'm picturing everyone's earth just pancaked right now. Everyone crumpling it up into a ball to go back to
pancake. Yeah. So, very interesting stuff. And like you said, gone to the top there. It's just kind of, just something to get you thinking. Definitely probably the most anti-conditioning that I've ever sort of experienced. But, there you go. Something to take a look at when you're supposed to be working at your desk. So
or
check
driving.
out,
Well,
or
you're
driving or whatever. Do some more stuff. All right. I want to say hello to Raphael in New York State.
Raphael.
Yes. I don't know.
New York.
Some guy named Raphael
New York,
is listening to this.
On the other side of this flat country.
Yes. You're just a stone's throw away. There you go, everybody. Anyways, I hope you're still listening right now because we're going to share with you how you can support Canary Cry Radio. Woo. Yeah, go to canarycryradio.com. You can click on the support tab. There, you can make a one-time donation in any amount. Or if you're just like really looking to support on a monthly basis, you can also do that there. And it just happens automatically. It's great. You don't have to think about it. It's just there. And you're helping us stay on the air, the internet, wherever. All right. What else? Anything, Gons?
We have the 100th episode coming up.
We keep plugging this.
And we have some peripheral ideas of what we're going to do. So stay tuned for that. And there'll probably be some sort of announcement of what it encompasses in the next couple episodes, I would assume, right, Basil?
Yep. Yeah, sure.
And it might involve more people than
it'll be a party.
First think. Yeah.
It'll be a party, so get ready. Put on your party pants, everybody. All right.
Okay.
Goodbye.
That is a terrible ending. You need to end it right.
Oh, I thought I already did that.
No.
Oh,
you need
okay.
to end it properly or we're going to get hate mail.
Not just goodbye.
Goodbye.
the only episode. Bye. So there you go. Thanks for listening to this episode of Canary Cry Radio. Make sure to tune in next time. But until then, think outside the cage.
Hey guys, this is Gons. Basil doesn't know I'm doing this, but this is just a little extra gem for anyone that's still listening. Now, first off, I know this topic was probably pretty heavy, pretty confusing, maybe even ridiculous sounding to some of you, but I do want to say that there's a lot of drama in the sort of conspiracy world right now concerning this topic of flat Earth. And there's been a handful of people that have come seemingly out of the blue and started talking about this, making videos on YouTube and whatnot. And Mark, our guest on this episode, has actually been accused of being a shill. And I expect the best in people, so I'm not calling Mark a shill. I'm really not. But I do want to share some other views of the flat Earth model that are out there. And this comes from a guy named Matt Boylan. I referenced him in the episode early on, but his model of the flat Earth is different. And the biggest difference with his model and Mark's model that he explained in the episode is that he believes there are no boundaries. In other words, he believes that this dome-shaped model that Mark is pushing, and a couple others have different sort of models that they're pushing, he believes that that model that's being pushed is disinformation to keep us contained within this section, if you will, of the flat Earth. And I know it kind of sounds nutty, but I do want to share it because I found it compelling. And I'll leave links to the NASA channel on YouTube, which is Matt Boylan's YouTube channel, where I got some of this information and I wanted to share it with you before the end of this episode, just as sort of an extra little tidbit. But according to Matt Boylan, and I guess it's not Matt, it's math, like numbers, math, Boylan. Anyway, according to him, the ice sheet of the Antarctic that surrounds the current Earth, as we understand it, it's still flat. He promotes the idea that it's flat, but he believes that there are other land masses on the other side of the large ice sheet. And he wants to do this expedition basically where he goes straight across the ice sheet into this other landmass. And he believes it's Atlantis or, whatever you want to call it. But he, if I'm not mistaken, believes that the flatness of the universe, so to speak, extends either infinitely or much larger than simply the Earth that we know it. And he believes also that there's a sky and space and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit different from the enclosed model. And what Matt Boylan is suggesting is that the reason why there are people coming out with this enclosed flat Earth model is because the elite know that there are other land masses on the other side of the ice sheet. And what they want to do is pretty much leave this land mass, if you will, or this Earth mass, if you want to call it that, and go to this other place. And effectively, he's saying that they want to create this world as an enclosed, controlled android world. And this gets into just crazy conspiracy on top of crazy conspiracy. And I'm not even suggesting that it's true. I'm just presenting another viewpoint. And so if we can get Matt Boylan on Canary Cry Radio, I would love to do that. We'll see. We'll reach out to him and whatnot, but I do want to throw that out there. And there's another guy named Eric Dubé, who is also a flat earther. I'm not entirely sure on exactly what his model is, but there's a lot of stone throwing going on in the conspiracy world, everyone calling each other a shill. And so just wanted to relay that information to you, because if we are truly thinking outside the cage, then even the crazy notion that the world is flat inside a dome should be pushed. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode.